Chairman, for decades, law enforcement has sought out tools that would enable them to respond to a range of situations as they work to keep our communities safe. Among the tools available is a growing array of weapons that are designed to be less lethal than traditional firearms, providing officers with options to de-escalate a situation, stop a suspect, or prevent immediate harm without having to resort to a sidearm. Democrats have consistently supported legislation that gives law enforcement the tools and training to make our communities safer, including legislation that would promote the use of less than lethal weapons in place of lethal weapons. But this bill would take us in the opposite direction. Despite its title, this bill has nothing to do with law enforcement. In fact, the title of the bill is the only place that the words law enforcement are found. What this legislation does is rewrite the definition of firearm throughout the entire criminal code to exclude certain less lethal but still highly dangerous weapons. This would apply not only to law enforcement but to everyone, including those who are not legally allowed to possess firearms. The bill creates a new loophole that will put dangerous weapons into the hands of domestic abusers, convicted felons, and others prohibited from having a firearm, providing them access to these weapons without a background check. Under this loophole, the regulations that make guns traceable will also not apply to these less lethal weapons, so they will be untraceable when they are used in crimes. The bill makes all of us, including law enforcement, less safe. Supporters of the bill argue that it is needed to bring the Gun Control Act of 1968 in line with modern technology and ensure that law enforcement can use these less lethal weapons. While it is true that technology is always advancing, many of these weapons have been around in essentially the same form for decades, and many of them have consistently been found to meet the definition of a firearm. The classification of some less lethal weapons as firearms did not prevent many law enforcement agencies from adopting them as they were developed and refined, and less than lethal weapons continue to be used by many law enforcement agencies today. Supporters also argue that change is needed because the classification of these weapons as firearms in federal law may result in the use of the weapon being considered deadly force, even though the device is designed to be less than lethal. But states are more than capable of updating their laws to account for these technologies, and many do have laws specific to less lethal weapons. Contrary to the assertions made by supporters of the bill, federal courts have found the use of these devices to be a form of, quote, intermediate force, while recognizing that they can still cause serious injury and, quote, present a significant intrusion upon an individual's liberty interests. There is no indication that federal or state law, including judicial precedents, are out of step with the design and use of these weapons, much less that such a mismatch has prevented law enforcement adoption of these tools. To the extent that a state or court may choose to regard the use of these weapons as deadly force, it might be because these weapons can cause serious injuries and even kill. Lethal in Disguise 2, a joint report of the International Network of Civil Liberties Organizations, Physicians for Human Rights, and the Omega Research Foundation, found that weapons that are supposed to be less lethal have caused permanent blindness, brain damage, internal bleeding, eye injuries, burns, other severe injuries, and numerous deaths, especially when used inappropriately. Unfortunately, many people experience the inappropriate use of these less lethal weapons firsthand during the protests in response to the murder of George Floyd. During these protests, numerous demonstrators, bystanders, and journalists suffered severe injuries after being hit with projectiles that are designed to be less lethal. At least 60 people sustained serious head injuries, and at least 7 people lost an eye. One woman was put in a medically induced coma in an effort to help her recover from severe injuries. Clearly, these weapons are in fact dangerous and even deadly. They will continue to be, whether or not they are classified as firearms. Many law enforcement agencies have policies that recognize the potential harm of less lethal weapons and restrict their use to immediate threats of violence or physical harm, require reporting of the use of less than lethal weapons, and promptly review uses of these weapons to prevent abuse, just as they do for traditional firearms. With appropriate policies, departments can and already do use less lethal weapons to improve community safety and avoid resorting to lethal force. Given that law enforcement already does have access to less lethal weapons, there simply is no need for legislation that creates a dangerous loophole that would make all of us less safe. I urge members to oppose this legislation, and I yield back the balance of my time.